This game is known for making people bawl their eyes out. And it begins with, in a world where neither you nor God would exist. But the 12-year-old MC Nadeshiko attends a school with only talented rich kids. She lives kind of secluded and isn't really interested in mingling with her classmates, though she actually feels a bit lonely alone in the house with her working father. That's probably why she and her best friend Ichibyou, together with 4 other kids, get assigned to supplementary classes where they are to learn how to cooperate. At the same time, she starts having weird dreams about a future world that lies in ruins, where she meets the grown-up versions of her classmates. And she quickly realizes that these worlds begin to intertwine, as a wound she got in the dream world stays in the real world. And the figures from the dream start appearing at her school. I hope I don't spoil too much, but I think it's kind of obvious from the trailer that in the common route, that took me about 13 hours in the first run, you romance the kid version of each character, and then in the character routes, you meet the grown-up version of each character. That might or might not differ from the impression you had of the kid. I go through the characters in the order I would personally recommend them to play, but that slightly differs from the officially recommended route order. But all guides start with Ichibyou, Nadeshiko's good childhood friend. He's a true tsundere, not honest at all, but Nadeshiko still understands him and they are very close. Proactivity is not in his dictionary, but he stays in the tea club out of responsibility. And he becomes envious at the new kid that spends so much time with Nadeshiko now, and is secretly a crybaby. In his childhood route, you have many events about their childhood together, and so you do in the grown-up route. I think I like the childhood version better, as he was a true tsundere, and his grown-up version got a bit softer. Shuya is a little sleepyhead who is often absent-minded, loves to read, and also works as a model. He's unintentionally funny because he doesn't have a clue of what's going on or of common sense. After everyone introduced themselves, he just called them by their hobbies because he couldn't remember their names. And that's why his route was one of the funniest to me, because of his lack of common sense, but it also has its tragic sides and had an unusual conflict even for this game's standard. The red-haired Todanusuke or Toda easily gets into fights, sleeps at class or ditches class altogether, is kind of a rowdy, but he loves machines and video games. Though he always seems rude, he can actually also be very kind to Nadeshiko, but he's definitely a character with 2 faces. He can act extremely violent in 1 second and extremely gentle in the next. And that makes him my favorite character, as you might have guessed. He's unpredictable, hard to read, and really passionate in every respect. I even went as far as to compare him to Yang, what made for a very interesting discussion on Twitter, but I think you get the point. Oh, and at his root, the MC was at her best. Instead of waiting for her fate to happen, she takes action herself and opposes everyone who doesn't treat her properly. I loved her in this route. She did everything I would have done in that situation. The younger Madoka unintentionally makes his classmates cry because he's too honest, gets into fights to protect his brother, as these two seem to be in their own world. He always agrees with his brother and has no hobbies, but only defines himself over his brother. And I was so annoyed of him in the common route. Oh my god, he always said, yeah, if my brother says so, and doesn't seem to form an own opinion, and that makes me so mad. But luckily, this issue was already addressed in the childhood route. In his grown-up route, on the other hand, he seems like a completely different person and creeped me out so much. I mean, I love feeling creeped out, but still. Where he seems extremely cold, doesn't seem to care about Nadeshiko, and still follows orders blindly. But that makes it very interesting to discover his real character, his real intentions, and to witness him grow and develop. So he's a very close second favorite, or maybe when I see the character as a whole, even my favorite, especially with this one kiss scene he earns my most sexy award for. Very well earned. And in combination with his extra after story, that was just too cute. And his CG commentaries. Yeah. After you've played Toda and Madoka, you can play his older brother, Nakama. He can't adapt to his surroundings, can't read the air at all, but loves to eat and cook, is an otaku and denpa, saying strange things, and acts before he thinks. And I was even more annoyed by him in the common route than by Madoka. I can't believe it myself. And sadly, that didn't change in the character route. He's like a nice prince character, always friendly and always wanting to help people, with no dark secret whatsoever. I think they added him in the Vita version And I would argue you kind of notice that because he doesn't have his own revelations. So if I would be completely honest, I would recommend to skip him. You don't miss out on anything, except of course if you like nice characters. Last is Takato, who is the new kid in class. He's very open and curious and immediately wants to be friends with Nadeshiko and also joins the supplementary classes out of his own free will. He does research about clock zero, what means stopping time. Yes, that's the Japanese translation. What becomes then the name of this group of friends. And he somehow resembles the teacher who assigned the extra classes. Takato is the poster boy and I definitely see why, though that doesn't mean he's boring at all. He actually turns out to be rather twisted. After you play his endings, some additional scenarios unlock, so it's really recommended to play him last. Coming to the art of the game, and starting with my favorite voices, those were Ichiro's voice, because I just like characters with deep voices. He also voiced Luki in Lover Pretend, Hasegawa in Kodoshia and Strawberry, and Masato in Tricolite Eyes you can hear when you tune in on our stream on Sundays. Then Toda's voice, who will also voice Tyrell in Even If Tempest, and has also voiced Kashka in Sendirion Palika, or now Masa in Yunohana Spring. But I think in this role, he's at its best actually, because he really sounds like a rough and slangy guy. Then Madoka's voice actually. He also voices Ichiya in Variable Barricade and how I couldn't stand his voice. And Natora in Sandrion Palika, another character with a huge broken problem. And starting out, I didn't like his voice as Madoka neither, but the longer I played him, the more it grew on me, and now it might be my favorite voice and favorite character and favorite route, probably. The other voices are Shuya, who also voiced Kent in Amnesia, or Kota in Yunohana Spring, and Takato will also voice Silva in the upcoming Hamafura game. And I think his voice there is way better, as for example in Clone in Sandrion Palika, but he also voiced Takeru in Collex Malice. And the sprites and CGs are alright, I would say they are good, but especially the CGs, though they were placed in good scenes and often romantic scenes, for some reason they couldn't convey the romantic feelings for me or didn't have a lot of tension. Same goes for the music, it's good, but there was still something missing for me, like how they made use of it especially. For example, for me to be able to cry in a game really strongly connects with the music. So I need very tragic music that always plays when it's a tragic situation that tells me, please Lynn, cry. But I felt that in this game, though it had good music, it wasn't used in that way, because in some tragic scenes there was just the normal background music playing and not the super tragic music one. And another thing that kind of put me off is when the scene ended, the music ended abruptly instead of fading out. So I would say the music didn't quite adapt to the flow of the game, and it wasn't used to its full potential. Now to the tone of the game. This game is definitely plot driven, but still somehow manages to have enough time for romantic scenes. Though some love development seemed a bit rushed to me because the character grown-up routes are all about 4 to 5 hours, but most of them are well paced and relatable, like the characters have time to talk about their feelings, about their fears, about their dreams, and really get to know each other, so it makes it easy to connect to their development of their relationship. What is kind of confusing in that regard is that the game is kind of split into two, the childhood part, where you witness their cute interactions and see them grow close together as friends, and that is suddenly interrupted by the transition into the future to the grown-up part, what made me wonder why I had to romance the kids in the first place, when I kind of have to start all over again with the grown-ups. What also brings me to the elephant in the room. She's 12 and romances guys. I know that might seem deeply appalling to you, but on the one hand, I think like 12-year-olds are more mature than you might think they are. And more importantly, the game has an explanation later why you don't need to feel weirded out watching a 12-year-old girl romancing guys. Trust me, trust me. The tone overall of the game is a bit darker, though nothing really bad happens for the most parts. There are some deadly endings, and overall way too many endings. If you want to complete this game, I highly recommend a guide. Some of them are more interesting, some of them less, but nothing really gory or scary happens in them. It's a serious game that deals with serious problems, and can even feel bittersweet and hopeless sometimes. So the origin of most of these problems are science fiction inventions. They are not the main focus, but are kind of there and make the plot happen to begin with. The theories behind them are alright, not as bad as in Shuuen, but still a physicist might flinch at some explanations. And it's exactly this setting that also actually makes this game quite difficult for learners. I would even say it's upper intermediate stage, because of a lot of scientific or complicated vocabulary. But on the other hand, this is one of the few games with an actual useful dictionary function, where they either explain Japanese idioms or some of the scientific vocabulary like Schrödinger's cat. Another helpful feature for learners are the assignments in the common root, because they practically function as reading comprehension tests on diverse topics. I still don't quite get the reason for these assignments, but from a learning standpoint, they're extremely helpful. There are also a few time choices that could be stressful for learners, but there's no shame in pausing and consulting a guide. So if you want to challenge your Japanese with this game, you could purchase it via the links in the description, because everything you buy from these links will vastly support the channel so I can provide better and more videos. And you can also join the Discord, where we hold a little book club for this game, discuss what's happening, share a vocabulary sheet, or help out with translations. And as I think this game is really worth discussing, definitely feel free to join. My verdict about the game, starting with the negative. And what I hated the most, I really mean drove me crazy, was that you have to play the common route again and again and again. I don't know, maybe it was just my guide that made me do it, but if it was intended like this by the developers, I'm not happy with that. It felt like a total slog, no fun at all. Some scenes could be skipped to next scene skipped, others can only be skipped read, and then there are the character scenes that can't be skipped at all, if you still want to read them. So yeah, really bad concept in my opinion. Luckily, this issue was addressed in the Switch version of the game that allows you to skip all the assignments automatically, and that added new content about the characters being in middle school together. But I only played the Vita version, so yeah. But apart from that, the game is very well written. It tells an interesting story about time travel and the moral predicaments that come with it, without giving the science fiction elements too much attention, and still balancing a heavy plot with the romantic scenes. Every route felt very distinct from each other, as every character comes with his own perspective on the plot and what's happening. And most of them are interesting to get to know, and ask you to think about the gap between child and grown-up, past and future, and the meaning of identity. Some routes seemed more romantic to me than others, but that might as well boil down to personal taste, and there were at least 2 routes with overbearing and possessive characters, what I highly appreciate. So how much did I like the game? People died? Check. Plot? Check. Romance? Check. What was missing? The art for me. Though the plot and characters had the best prerequisites with the writers from Amnesia, Collex, Malice, but for some reason the art department couldn't quite convince me, be it the CGs or the music. Especially the music plays a huge role for my emotional investment. And I need the violence to kick in hard to make me cry. So disappointingly, I didn't cry. But I still acknowledge that, without any doubt, this game is not ported from the PS2 and PSP to the PS Vita and the Switch, and even mobile, without a reason. It tells a tragic story about love, loss, and time. In that regard, similar to Ouien no Village, but not as gory and hopeless. I'm highly interested in discussing this game with you either in the comment section or the Discord. And if you like this video, also consider to like or subscribe, or go all in and buy the game. I hope I see you then. Bye!